Hey guys, welcome back to another PS2 Memories video. Here we are actually taking a look at Resident Evil Code Veronica X that was actually released on the PlayStation back in 2001. This game actually pretty much started off life actually on the Sega Dreamcast the year before in 2000. But then it was later ported onto the likes of the PlayStation 2 and then further onto other consoles, the likes of the Nintendo GameCube, then later on in 2002, 2003. The differences between the likes of the PlayStation version and the Dreamcast version, there is actually added content in terms of the likes of certain areas that you can actually access and even more likes of video sequences. Plus, there were certain versions of the game that also give you access to a free DVD with additional information regarding the timeline story of the Resident Evil series at that point, known as the Wesker's Report, where Wesker actually speaks himself through the timeline from the events leading up to the first game all the way through to the current events of Code Veronica. So it kind of gives you a full background of the story, which is actually really cool. So the story actually takes place in the game 3 months after the events of Resident Evil 2 and 3, and you continue on the role of Claire Redfield, who's actually still looking for her brother Chris, and where she ends up infiltrating an Umbrella facility and gets captured, and she's then sent to an island as a prisoner, which later becomes invaded and is overrun with the T-virus. It's actually Wesker that invades the island and he spreads the virus throughout the island, and then Claire happens to just be in that situation. So on her journey she manages to come across another character who's also trapped on the island by the name of Steve, and together they try to work together to try and get off the island. So what the story kind of takes place from that point and continues on pretty much the whole premise until later on in the game Claire eventually does meet up with Chris. Later on in the game you do get to play as Chris Redfield from the original game, because at this point Chris was only ever really in the first Resident Evil game and he hadn't been seen for quite a while because he wasn't in Resident Evil 2 or Resident Evil 3, but then he makes an appearance again in this here game. So it was actually quite cool to go back and actually get to play as Chris again after quite a while. The game itself is also the first game in the series to be fully 3D with the use of the likes of the pre-rendered style backgrounds, although like as you can see on the screen, camera does move somewhat with the character, but they've still got the fixed type of camera angles. But again, everything is rendered in full 3D, which was a first for a Resident Evil game at the time. I do actually remember when I actually first played this, my brother actually had it. He actually got it on the Sega Dreamcast, and I remember, as a funny story, I was actually studying for my exit level exams, or what was called a leaving cert here in Ireland, because I was 18 at the time and I was supposed to be studying for my exams, and to be honest I did very little studying, because when this game actually came out, all I did the whole weekend before my exams actually, or during my exams were starting and currently going through them, all I was doing was playing Resident Evil Code Veronica, because that's all I wanted to do, because at the time I was just obsessed with any new Resident Evil game that came out. I just wanted to play it, period, because again I was just absolutely addicted to it. So I didn't get much studying done, let's just put it that way. This took priority over that, in fairness. But anyway, back to the game. The game itself, even though it is the first game to fully use 3D, the game itself is definitely, in terms of the story, is actually quite a bit longer compared to the previous games. Although if you do a good speed run in the game, you can complete the game within 3.5 to 4 hours. But there's still a lot in the game, because again, you play as multiple characters, and say you play as Claire for the first half of the game, and then for the second half of the game later on, just when you think the game is over, you are surprised then to know that it keeps going on, and then you later get to play as Chris then later on in the game. So if you were new to playing the game at the time, that was the really good thing about it. It left you with a lot of surprises. It definitely left you on tenterhooks, because you genuinely thought at one point the game was actually over, only for it to continue on for another couple of hours. So it was quite incredible, and that's what made it all the more appealing and addictive to actually play, is the fact is that it gave you that false sense of everything finishing up that you would have been so used to in the previous games. So this game definitely changed that up a little bit. Now the game itself generally changes up the aesthetics in terms of some of the playable features. Like here you can wield the likes of dual weapons in either hand, which was definitely a new feature that was presented in the game at that time, compared to the previous games on the likes of older systems like the PlayStation 1, Sega Saturn and so forth. And later on, as you go through the game, you get to see more scenes on the PlayStation 2 version that you didn't get to see on the Dreamcast version. There was additional content, like I said, that was added to it, and some of the features as well, that you got to have additional scenes with the likes of Chris and Wesker, especially towards the end of the game. So Wesker definitely had more influence in the game that you could definitely see, and it kind of did help to kind of give a better idea of the actual story as well as how everything was going to play out at the time. What was also a good addition as well, like even with the other Resident Evil games, primarily even with like Resident Evil 2 and 3, was the addition of battle mode. And the cool thing about this is if you manage to complete the battle mode and do all the tasks and definitely try and get high rankings and complete it in faster times, you would gain access to additional bonuses like infinite ammo and even infinite weapons as well, so that you could actually potentially then replay the game then to make it a little bit easier for yourself. The game definitely does have a high difficulty curve as well compared to previous games, because there's definitely a lot going on, and you definitely do have to take into account your item inventory management and so forth to be able to, and you have to make sure you're using the right weapons at the right times to be able to have a really good chance to actually get through certain scenarios, and generally just to make your life a wee bit easier. But it definitely, even though it was the first full 3D Resident Evil game, it still kept the same survival horror kind of element as well, but it just excelled it, because it stuck to the primary story of the series, and you could see the evolution of the games, especially if you compared them to the PlayStation 1 games. And this was definitely a premise for what was to come later on with other games in the series, like even Resident Evil 4 and even other spin-off that came out on the PlayStation 2. So this was definitely a really good example of that. It is still considered to be one of the best games in the series, so much to a point where it actually did get other variations of the game actually made in terms of the second FPS, like light gun style game in Gun Survivor 2, and it pretty much uses the whole Code Veronica world for that game, but it's done more of in an arcade style. So it's not so much survival horror, more so arcade, but again it uses all the similar features, but it's all in first person, and it uses the likes of the light gun features. But also, it was also kind of retold another version of the game, the Dark Side Chronicles, that was released on the Nintendo Wii 2009, and then later ported to the PS3 then a few years later. And it also kind of told different variations of the story within the Code Veronica game itself, but from different kind of perspectives. But at the time, it even had better graphics and so forth, so you could get to see that version of the game. But again, that was also in kind of like a first person light gun style format, because that was definitely one of the ways that Capcom were trying to get involved with the likes of first person style Resident Evil games. They had originally done it with the likes of Resident Evil Survivor on the PS1, so they had tried to start implementing those ideas moving forward, and you can see that over the years with all the games. But this is definitely one of the best Resident Evil games in the series in general, and if you haven't played this game yet, I do highly recommend that you actually go and play this game, because it is phenomenal, and it's still just as good today as it's ever been. And if you have played it, I'd love to know what your thoughts of it. What are your experiences, and did you enjoy it? Is this your favourite Resident Evil game? Be sure to share it down in the comments below. So if you have enjoyed this video and you do like these type of games and you're a big fan of survival horror and you want to see more videos like this, then be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon to be updated whenever future videos are released. And also be sure to check out a lot of the other videos on the channel to see more similar type of videos, and even videos from other genres and types of games that were released on the PlayStation 2. And remember to keep those gaming memories alive.